All right, thank you for your patience. We're going to go ahead and get started. Just to introduce myself, my name is Alexander Traversa, and I'm a planner with JTA. Today, we'll be sharing with you the U2C Transit-Oriented Development Pilot Project presentation. This is focusing on the Southwest Corridor. So as I said, I'm a planner with JTA, focusing on environmental sustainability and transit-oriented development projects. With me today, I have our project team with Josh Turner, who's the lead urban designer with WSP, and Jimmy Kim, who's the principal and TOD practice leader at HRNA. And so the goal for this meeting is to kind of be a public engagement aspect. So below your screen, you'll see a box where you can leave comments. Feel free to leave comments throughout the presentation for any questions or comments you may have. At the end of the presentation, we'll have a question and answer session where we'll address them. I'll also do my best to answer any questions throughout the presentation and then circle back in the Q&A session to address those further. You can also comment or text to comment by texting to 73224 with the message JTA TOD. That's all one word, all lowercase. And then you'll receive a response back asking for your comments, and then you'll be able to text a comment. And that'll also appear in the comment section. Alternatively, you can also send an email address to the email listed on the meeting screen, which is a366@publicinput.com. So again, today we're here to share with you some of our initial findings from the Transit-Oriented Development Pilot Project, specifically focusing on the Southwest Corridor. With this, we're really trying to engage the community and the public to really understand if we're hitting a mark as far as understanding the neighborhood characteristics and if we're hitting the right spots for potential TOD in those neighborhoods. And then also kind of what you want to see out of this kind of development going on in these areas. And then so one last thing you can find out more information about this project on our project website, and that's at u2ctod.jtafla.com. There you'll be able to find more information about the project, as well as take our survey, which is our primary tool of gathering public feedback throughout the engagement phases of this project. You also have the ability to submit questions and comments on the study website, as well as contact us directly. So what we're going to talk about today is I'm going to do a little bit of a refresher about the Ultimate Urban Circulator. Many of you may have heard it. We've done a fair bit of outreach for past planning projects regarding this. For those that's new, I'm just going to give it a really high level overview. Feel free to reach out to our planning team or automation team for more in-depth information about that project, or visit the U2C website at u2c.jtafla.com. Again, we'll go over a brief overview of this project, and then we'll kind of dive into our initial findings for a TOD assessment for the Southwest Corridor and those station areas. And then I'll explain a little bit more about the survey, and then we'll go into a Q&A session, followed by kind of the next steps of our project. So what is the Ultimate Urban Circulator? The U2C is JTA's way of introducing a high-frequency circulator into the downtown and surrounding neighborhoods. Again, it's high-frequently serviced. This is to help improve accessibility within the core, as well as the surrounding neighborhoods, and connect some of those access points. The goal here was to figure out a service that would be flexible for future expansion, as well as leverage some of the existing infrastructure of the Skyway. So the U2C will be operating, or would operate, on the existing Skyway infrastructure, and then transition down to street level or at grade as it makes its way into the extension neighborhoods. So this project, the UCC program, kind of came about through the results of the Skyway Modernization Program. This was a study done back in 2015 where the JTA engaged the public and asked a series of questions about kind of the Skyway and the future of the Skyway, as well as doing kind of an in-depth analysis of some of the issues that are currently happening with the Skyway. So as a result, they identified that we needed to address some of the system deficiencies of the Skyway. The vehicles were no longer being manufactured. It was becoming very costly to upkeep and even challenging to fabricate some of the parts ourselves. Again, we had a lot of feedback saying that the Skyway didn't ever reached where it was supposed to go. So we really wanted to improve the system and improve those modal connections, as well as kind of those transfer points between the local bus services and the Skyway. And then also help support the city's goal of economic development in and around downtown. So after all of the analysis, the JTA board gave us the direction to keep, modernize, and expand the Skyway. And the primary way of doing this was replacing the vehicles. So what came to the top were autonomous vehicle technology as the replacement for the Skyway vehicles. And then again, so we're phasing this project out. Some of you may know that the first phase being advanced is the Bay Street Innovation Corridor, which runs along Bay Street from the central station of the existing Skyway to the sports and entertainment complex. Following that, we'll do some, the conversion would be the next piece. We'll focus on converting in sections, and the first piece would likely be the JRTC to Jefferson Station as a proof of concept for that. And then as we plan these extensions, we're further refining these corridors, so there's flexibility in planning. So the goal of it, or the ultimate output of the UTC program, would be to expand the existing 2.5-mile elevated Skyway system into a 10-mile system that utilizes both the elevated and at-grade features throughout the downtown and surrounding neighborhoods. So being able to connect to the surrounding neighborhoods without putting a large amount of intrusive infrastructure in is really helpful, and that helps the program be very agile and able to adjust to certain demands within those areas. Again, leveraging multiple public investments, we'll utilize the existing Skyway infrastructure. It'll connect to both the Jacksonville Regional Transportation Center and the previous transit station at Rosa Parks, utilizing all of the existing Skyway stations. And then also we'll coordinate with the DIA and the city on a lot of their investments in the downtown area. And again, in its entirety, it will develop an autonomous transportation network. So surrounding this is this concept of transit-oriented development. Transit-oriented development, or transit-supportive urbanism, kind of falls in the smart growth category. And really the ultimate goal is to create a more sustainable form of development in which you incorporate a mix of uses, including housing, office, retail, as well as other amenities, which help cater to the needs of active transportation users. So that includes walking and biking, as well as transit users. So transit-oriented developments are usually centered around a high frequency or premium transit service, and it extends into the area of about a half mile. And so within that, there'll be all sorts of amenities, including complete streets features, pedestrian-friendly infrastructure, as well as connections to and from, all of the areas to make it easy or accessible. And so it really de-emphasizes the need for personal automobile use within the area, as well as the ability to travel between TOD nodes using transit. So I do see a question that came in. So what will the stops look like? The stops are still being designed. The test and learn facility had just a standard transit stop. The nice part about using a vehicle that can utilize the regular roadway is, we can use something similar to that of our existing BRT stops. Something with a little bit more technology involved, though. We have, live headway times and stuff for our BRTs. So some live information, totems, things of that nature would really make a little bit more of a technologically advanced stop that compared to a traditional bus stop, but still being designed. So TOD really ties into JTA's mission. We're really just trying to improve mobility for Jacksonville and the surrounding region, and especially helping improve economic opportunity. So, a project of this scale has the ability to draw both investment from technology as well as developers. So bringing that development back and helping support the city's goal of kind of reinvesting in the downtown and the surrounding neighborhoods is a big portion of this. And then again, kind of bringing that sustainable growth pattern back to Jacksonville, where right now we're seeing a lot of developers moving out to greenfields and developing, further and further out, causing more sprawl, which then leads further to congestion and things of that nature. So really just re-centralizing and trying to create a more sustainable development pattern. So moving forward, so the plan kicked off early this year. Started with our project team doing a deep dive into some of the existing conditions within the corridors. This started with on-the-ground work. We did a lot of site surveys, took some pictures, did some data dive, and really all of this was utilized to then build out kind of our existing conditions analysis. And from there, we were able to start to develop a preliminary TOD desirability and readiness assessment of some of the proposed stations. And so that's kind of what we'll be sharing with you today. We just want to kind of get some feedback on, some of the thoughts about, what typologies were used and some of the data that we share, and if the community feels the same way about those. So from there, we'll then begin to refine those station area plans in our task 4 section, which is station area planning for 6 of the selected stations. We'll come back for some more public engagement once we refine those stations a bit, and then get some public feedback to kind of finish out driving those stations towards completion. And then finally with task 5 is how will we actually achieve those, or how do we actually achieve that TOD at those stations? So that'll outline some of the important tasks or steps that we'll need to do, whether it be policy or community engagement, things like that, to then make those a reality. And then we'll do one final round of public engagement towards the end of the year. So again, our project website is a great resource for any information you might need on the project. There's tons of videos about TOD and kind of the benefits of TOD. There's corridor maps and all the corridor information and assessments that we're doing as part of the project. Under the Engage tab, you'll be able to participate in our survey, which is another way we're collecting the data and public engagement for this project. And then after these presentations tomorrow, we'll load up the presentations into our resources tab, and that's where you'll find a lot of our public engagement tools. You'll also have the ability to contact us directly. And so again, that project website is u2ctod.jtafla.com. So just to address a comment that's still relating to the station design, yes, likely that most of these stations will have some form of shelter and seating. Again, we're still in early design for those, so that's not fully determined yet. But yeah, similar to if it's an at-grade station, it will be a concrete pad, shelter, and likely totem or information kiosk. So moving into the study area overview, this kind of was fleshed out a bit in the transit concepts and alternatives review planning study that focused on the extensions of the Skyway system. So currently extending off the existing Skyway, Brooklyn Station is actually currently just used as JTA's Skyway Maintenance and Operations Center, but there is existing track there. So we have an opportunity to come down to the street level there. So Brooklyn Station is, one of our key stations. And then moving into the Riverside and Five Points areas will be kind of the next step. And this was a result, these stations were a result of kind of destinations that came to the top of public engagement as part of the Skyway modernization program. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Jimmy to talk a little bit about our real estate analysis.
Hi, thank you, Alexander. Hi, this is Jamie Kim. I'm with a firm called HR&A Advisors. We specialize in real estate and economic development, and I also focus on TOD projects across the country. As sort of the first task that we undertook for this project earlier in the year, we conducted a market study. The purpose of the market study is to understand, what sort of level of market activity there's been and projected to be along the corridor, so we could work with Josh Turner and the WSP team ultimately to come up with concepts at station areas that would actually be, that the private sector would actually kind of gravitate towards. One of the goals of this TOD plan is to revitalize the downtown area, and a key component of that is to bring more residents into this area. I think we're excited by what we're seeing in the Southwest corridor. It's really sort of setting the standard for, kind of, it's, I think, aspirational for other parts of the corridor. Because there is a growing residential population, there are amenities like restaurants and stores. And so in order to bring this residential population in, we're looking at what is the market doing in terms of multifamily buildings that are coming in or have been built. And multifamily is just another word for apartments, whether these are apartments that are rentals or condos. And oftentimes we're seeing these in sort of mixed use buildings where there's ground floor retail, like we're seeing in lots of places in the Southwest corridor. The city overall has added 15,000 units over the past 10 years or so, and the corridors account for about 11% of that. What's striking is that the Southwest corridor, as you can see in the sort of pink box in this figure, is driving a lot of that activity. So that's really good news because we're seeing that there's sort of market demand. If you go to the next slide, in addition to residential, we also took a look at what potential market there might be for office. Downtown is obviously sort of home to a lot of the large financial and services companies, which actually drove the growth in the city overall in the mid-2010s as they expanded and they kind of take up a lot of space in these big office towers. However, growth has slowed down since the mid-2010s, and it's actually expected to decline. We can't solely rely on these big employers anymore. The office market is not as strong in downtown. There's a lot of competition in more suburban locations. However, there's still an opportunity to provide a more modest amount of office space mixed in with residential. These office spaces are more flexible, more creative, and we're seeing more of this trend coming online. And as part of our analysis, we take a look at what has recently come online in the corridor and what is expected to be delivered in the next couple of years. This is important to see what sort of rents these projects are achieving, what they look like in terms of their scale. So both in terms of their kind of construction methods, you know, these are 4 to 6 story. They're not big, tall glass towers, glass and steel towers. And, you know, are they sort of mixed use developments? And we're really pleased to see that in this corridor, we're seeing a lot of kind of exciting, you know, mid-scale mixed use buildings that are really kind of setting the standard. And I think we're going to be starting to explore the potential to add more of these types of developments in future station areas. And then I think with that, I'm going to turn this over to Josh Turner.
Great, thank you so much, Jamie. Again, my name is Josh Turner, and I'm an urban designer with WSP, and I'm very excited to be a part of this very important study associated with the U2C. You know, a little bit about WSP. We're a large engineering and infrastructure firm, but we also have a planning group, and we work side by side with our engineers and also transit authorities in cities to better integrate their transit projects, both new and expansions, in with the community. And we specialize in transit-oriented development. We've worked with many cities and many agencies on, you know, creating a vision that's unique and sincere to a given city. So we're, again, very excited to be here in Jacksonville. I want to give you just an idea of this last part of the conversation, some of the things that we'll be touching on. We're going to first talk about the system as a whole and the different types of places that we see at all the different stations, both existing and the new, but of course today we'll be focused on the Southwest Corridor. Then we'll get into our TOD assessment. We'll talk about the metrics that we use to really evaluate what we're seeing on the ground at these particular stations. It's an objective exercise, but then we begin to synthesize what we're seeing, and we utilize, us as our professional judgment as planners to really give an idea of really how these station areas are throughout the system. So going back to what we call topologies, or just the different categories of places throughout the system, from a system-wide look, we have 4 main categories, and these categories have been developed in conjunction with the community in Jacksonville, also key stakeholders, also important organizations like the DIA. And so, 4 categories: urban center, regional center, core neighborhood, and special use. Those are broad categories. We've taken a pass at further refining the definition of some of these station areas to better connect them to the type of place that they are. Urban center is what you may think it is. It's the central business district. It's those places which have the highest intensity of uses. It's going to have your office buildings, your downtown hotels. Jacksonville is unique in that it has both the North Bank central business district, if you will, and then it also has this type of intensity and density also in the South Bank. Regional centers are not urban centers, they're not central business districts, but they are places of a regional significance, and they can vary. Sometimes they'll have a strong academic focus. Often, especially here in Jacksonville, you have places throughout the system that have a healthcare focus. And then a place like JRTC, just north of Brooklyn, that station area is really emerging as a critical transportation hub for the entire Jacksonville region. And then we have our core neighborhoods, and then also our special use districts. Special use are not like the others. They're more destination and kind of one-offs as a place. So think about the outlet sports complex, the stadium, the arena, those type of attractors, and really what's planned to come. So in the Southwest Corridor, it's primarily the places are what we consider core neighborhoods. We do have a suggestion on the Riverside Arts Market Station of that, that particular area. We think of it as a regional center, and it's this type of thing that we really want your feedback on. Have we thought about your neighborhood, these places correctly? So talking about Riverside Arts Market, or RAM, while it's clear that this isn't a central business district, it certainly has a legacy of attracting employers. And while the office stock is on the older side, at the Riverside Station, you have the new office tower that's well underway in the planning process. So we think that there's still an opportunity for this to be a place of employment that's perhaps focused on finance, and then of course the Riverside Arts Market is certainly a destination in of itself, and really a regional draw that really puts this little neck of the woods on the map. Just some of the imagery, you have the Riverside Arts Market. It's a great use of space that's under the freeway, I-95. It is certainly a very large and formidable piece of infrastructure. And so any way that you can use urban design and program things, spaces like this, in like the successful way as a Riverside Arts Market is definitely a good thing. And of course, a cultural asset just south of the freeway, still within that striking distance of this regional center place that we're seeing. Next slide. So to round out the other places in the Southwest Corridor, under the topology or the place that this is a core neighborhood, we see a couple different types of places. Historic and urban, you can think of Springfield, you can think of San Marco, the square in San Marco, and certainly the Five Points neighborhood and the Park Street commercial corridor. So those places that are adjacent to a central business district or an urban center, but they're primarily residential and the densities are lower, and they have that commercial corridor kind of quote unquote Main Street atmosphere that is so highly desired by so many people, as far as wanting to be able to walk and engage your neighborhood without necessarily having to drive anywhere. In the Southwest Corridor, there's also another type of neighborhood that that's been a little bit more recent. We call it a multifamily neighborhood, and as Jimmy defined, these are just apartment buildings. And what we're seeing in Brooklyn really sets a really good precedent for the type of development that really has a lot of the characteristics of good transit-oriented development. Compact, walkable. The ground floors are activated with interesting uses of bars, restaurants, small shops. So we also, we see that at both at Riverside Station and the Brooklyn Station, really this kind of emerging neighborhood of multifamily residential, kind of a newer population. And just some of the images, of course, Park Street's fantastic, and Riverside Park really is an asset for the Southwest Corridor, and certainly U2C will be an important piece of these places moving forward with the expansion of the system. Next slide will just show some of the product, or some of the properties that are coming online. Again, from our experience in transit-oriented development and creating visions and plans, these are higher quality projects, and really set a good example for other station areas. And we look to really to the Southwest Corridor as what's possible and what the market is really able to bring on. Next slide. So with regards to connectivity, and connectivity in this regard is defined in a couple of different ways. It's defined by, of course, the existing transit in the area, and it's well served by JTA a bus network, both on Riverside Boulevard, Avenue, and then also on Park Street. There's also a existing bike infrastructure, but that's something that we think can continue to be improved upon. There's also that connection that's being planned to points west to the waterfront. And then, of course, there is the waterfront infrastructure there in this part of the downtown region that provides a essential kind of connectivity to the waterfront, or at least will. So moving into talking about these stations in a little bit more detail, and through the lens of our TOD assessment, I want to talk about just the metrics that we use when we think about these stations and we really try to evaluate the potential for TOD. We get an understanding for the local leadership. We take a look at the station area market strength, and again, it's really looking to, hey, what's coming online, what's in the pipeline, are developers and people moving to the area or wanting to build in the area. It really is it's a good indicator for what is potential. Also, physical suitability, and excuse me, what this is it really speaks to the availability for new TOD. And so that can take the form of, literally a lot that's vacant, or maybe an older strip center that is very car centric. Is that the highest and best use for that? Could that be reimagined as something maybe a little bit more urban and a little bit more walkable and pedestrian friendly? And then of course we have, and then we want to understand what the plans are that are in place now today as a guide to the planning that's been done, and really the legacy of these places. It's really our starting point. And we really look to those places as a guide. And some areas have more than others. So that's really where it helps to gauge our approach. We take all of that kind of objective collecting of information, and we divide it into strengths and opportunities and weaknesses and challenges. We then kind of bring this together and we give each station an actual score. So we rate those 4 categories: leadership, market strength, physical suitability, plans in place. We give it, a scoring of excellent, good, fair, maybe not so good, to arrive at a station's readiness for transit-oriented development and the desire. And they are 2 different things. A station area can be ready to go, but there's not a desire for this type of development, and it can be flipped as well. Next slide. So system-wide, we've taken a pass, and through that methodology, we've ranked all the stations in the area. You'll see the big red circle there. That's those stations that ranked the highest, both in desirability and readiness. Generally speaking, throughout the system, we find that most stations are in a pretty good position to really facilitate and support the planning for TOD. I did see a question about the 5-point station and why that ranked low in the Southwest corridor when the other stations are ranking kind of right there in the mid-level. And I'll get to that in a second. And there are some things that we were seeing. It really speaks to really kind of the desire and the readiness differences that we can suss out in our analysis. Next slide. So just working our way from north to south, and talking about the Brooklyn Station, we spoke about the new development that, at the Brooklyn Station area. This is a land use map that you see here on the right. And, at the waterfront, there's some non-residential or non-commercial uses. There are uses like the Haskell office, the Times Union site has a plan now for how that could be reimagined as something that is more mixed use in character. You also see the darker parcels. Those are vacant parcels. And, there's one that's pretty close to the station. There's also these vacant parcels along Park Street, and that'll be an important point as we move forward. Next slide. So overall, we think the Brooklyn Station area, it ranks fairly high, higher than most across the 4 metrics that we look at. Really important to point out is the local leadership, both kind of falling within the DIA's realm of downtown, but then also JTA providing really critical and key leadership to really support and drive the vision for economic development. Next slide. So connecting that back to the JTA, there's around the station area, there's a concentration of JTA owned property, but then also other publicly owned property. And when we think about the opportunity for TOD, a lot of times property that's held publicly is easier to get going sooner, or maybe less complicated than property that's held privately. And so we always look for kind of those early wins or those initial phases of, okay, if new development should happen around this station, where can it go first? And then, of course, the whole area is really a proven market for the type of development that has a lot of the characteristics of TOD. So we would want to capitalize and build upon that momentum. Next slide. So, JRTC, which we're not focused on today, it's just, it's not really a direct connect, but it's really just due north, kind of northwest. And, we really see Park Street as a really a critical connection between La Villa and the JRTC hub, and then to point southward, so Brooklyn, and then connecting right into 5 Points. We see that there's opportunity for vacant property that could be pulled into a larger vision for TOD. And you see that darker purple triangle, that's an assemblage of parcels that are owned by JTA. And we really think that that could be an opportunity to complement the development that's happened around the station area and really maybe be a catalyst for how this station area can continue to add new residences and amenities for everyone. Next slide. So moving on to Riverside, about this, very close to the Brooklyn station. If you can go to the next slide, this is where the FIS tower is being planned, and for that parking lot just to the, between the station here and the waterfront. So, that's a Class A office building. That's a significant type of development to occur in this area. So we continue to, like Brooklyn, see, these two stations really being able to continue the momentum of development that's occurred. But in this slide this image on the right, you see all those pink parcels and the yellow squares. We really, that's part of that Park Street story. Is there a way to, maybe it's a different type of development that's maybe not the large multifamily buildings, but maybe it's a type of development that perhaps reuses older buildings and have smaller, 2 to 3 story commercial buildings. That really, the idea of really building up that Park Street frontage to really reinforce that really, really important connection to La Villa. Next slide. Riverside Arts Market, if you can go to the next slide, this is part of that, this area that, has quite a bit of employment potential and existing employment. There's not a lot of easy places where we could suggest TOD to go. You see in the image on the right, there's 2 large squares. Those are, I wouldn't call them surface lots. They do have some grade changes with them, so it's a little more complicated. But, when we look at a place like this and we think about, what's possible, we think that, well, maybe there could be some type of shared structured parking, and there could be some new development that helps reposition those older office buildings and really just kind of reinforce this area as an important part of the regional employment, and then also continue to play up on its cultural assets like RAM and Coomer Arts Museum. Next slide. Finally, 5 Points. Just before we go to the next slide, I do want to say that, from a local leadership and a market perspective, 5 Points scores very highly. This is a place that if I was headed to Jacksonville, I would want to move to a place like 5 Points. It's really an ideal urban neighborhood that's very desirable. Where we don't think it scores so well, and if you can go to the next slide, is realistically if, around the station area, with it already built up so much, both with single family homes, and then also the rich commercial corridor along Park Street and Riverside Park, where are there opportunities for TOD type development? And in this area, there's already some newer apartments that are fairly dense, and it does add to, I've certainly felt a bit crowded, just those areas just to the east of Park Street. There's also really smart development, like that new office development, very small scale, kind of a shared space that has the restaurant on the ground floor. Those are excellent examples of infill development. So we see, it's fairly limited to what's possible here of what we're seeing. And when we think about the entire system, and if we were to move just a handful of stations forward, and develop visions for TOD, where are the priority stations? And we think that 5 Points is already in a really great place, and really it should be looked at as an example of some good examples of infill development. And with that, I want to thank you for your time. I'll turn this back over to Alexander.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you, Jimmy, for the great insight on some of the assessment of those TOD locations. So I just wanted to reiterate, please submit your comments into the comment box, and we'll do our best to address all of them during our Q&A. If they do start to come in pretty fast, we'll do our best to accommodate everybody's questions, and if we need to follow up after, we will. So again, just wanted to point you in the direction of the survey. On the screen now is the QR code. So if you have a smartphone or a device where you can take a picture of that, it'll take you directly to the website and take that survey. Additionally, you can access it at u2ctod.jtafla.com. And there you can also find some of the project information and, again, some of the stuff that we've presented today, as well as any of the future information that we'll be adding on to these corridor and stationary assessments. Again, the survey is broken down in a few ways. So we have a kind of a general questionnaire portion of it, and then you'll move into each corridor separately. So you can answer the corridor that you're interested, or all of the corridors, whatever you feel is necessary. But any feedback you can provide is great for us, and it'll help us kind of develop our frameworks for transit-oriented development and this project moving forward. So with that, I think we have a few questions I'd like to address as we move into the Q&A, and then if anything else comes to your mind, please feel free to enter them into the comments. And if not, follow up with the survey and just provide some feedback there as well. Any feedback is helpful for us to begin to incorporate into this plan. So I think we've done a good job of addressing some of these. Jimmy, is there one that you wanted to tackle?
Yeah, I was
with the HR has been doing some great work in COVID response. So
yeah, I was really intrigued by the question that came up on how the potential increase in work from home, how the potential increase in work from home impact real estate from traditionally desirable commuting locations. So one thing I do want to mention is that our study was started and wrapped up before the COVID lockdowns began. Obviously, it's a very different market right now. We hope it's sort of temporary, but it's bringing up a lot of not just national, but kind of global questions about, the future of work, the way people are, what does working look like? What do offices look like? And I don't think anybody has a crystal ball yet. There's a lot of debate about whether, cities still matter, whether people can trust density. But I think at the end of the day, Jacksonville and its downtown, it's not going away. These are important places to make investments. And one thing I will note is that, even before COVID, we were not very bullish on the office market and adding more offices to downtown. I think what we want to do is really just, provide the amenities that will attract a residential population so that it's not a district that sort of dies out after 5 o'clock and on weekends.
Great, thank you. And then just to add on to that, from kind of a sustainability and resiliency side of it, you kind of do see that TOD as kind of that live, work, play is able to kind of bounce back a little bit better during these kind of times. So having all of those in one place kind of addresses that need for like a commuter-centric area, similar to how our downtown currently operates. If the only thing down there is office space, then we see a decline in office commuting. You'll likely see a decline in that. But if you have a mix of uses, it won't be as drastically hit all at once. All right. So it looks like, so again, just high level, the corridors shown on the maps, these are still in the planning phase. So any kind of specific routing, turning directions, that'll all be worked out in, further down the planning and design phases. So I can't really address any kind of specific turns and things like that. These are just the corridors and the stations that we would like to hit, because these were the demands that were collected in previous surveys. But just to add on to that a little bit, so for the Bay Street Innovation Corridor, exploring with the IA in coordination with DOT for a mixed-use travel lane. So it really depends on kind of how much right of way we have and the impacts to parking and things of that nature. If we're able to, come up with a better parking strategy for these TODs, whether it be, going vertical with parking or unbundling that into kind of a shared use parking for the area, that might free up some space to then utilize, street parking for a dedicated lane in the future. But again, all of that will be determined in the specific extension planning and design. And just to further address some of these questions about what local leadership, Josh, I don't know if you want to touch on that, but so DIA has been a big leader in the downtown area, mostly from their vision and plan, but also through the development of the downtown overlay, which pushed out a lot of supportive zoning for TOD. So although it wasn't specifically targeted at TOD, a lot of those same principles apply. So parking, like no parking minimums and things of that nature, wider pedestrian spaces and more public use and activating those ground floors. So as far as leadership goes, and then as you move into these corridors, some of the preservation societies are big leaders in these corridors. So having those groups have visions for the corridors helps us kind of understand the fabric of the community and what that kind of look of a TOD should look and feel like, incorporating some of the historic aspects of it and maintaining a lot of that. So
yeah, and just to add to that, or to really just echo what you said, yeah, there's like the overall kind of the larger scale corridors where the DIA, for example, or JTA, they're providing excellent leadership and support for this type of planning. But yeah, when we get more into the finer grain or station by station in these specific places, it's absolutely essential not only to engage the community like we're doing today, but then also have additional points of engagement for those specific stakeholders. So Riverside, Avondale, and the emphasis on historic preservation is something that's definitely at the forefront of our mind, and we want to always think about incorporating and really embellishing those type of things to make these plans specific to a place and not generic.
Great, thanks, Josh. Another question: timetable for this corridor. Again, so all of these extensions are contingent on funding. Right now, we have been able to finish the transit concepts and alternatives review for the extensions. That planning phase kind of allows the JTA to then pursue federal dollars for these. So although there's no specific timetable, the corridors are contingent on funding, and the JTA is prepared to pursue funding for these corridors. Similar to how the Bay Street Innovation Corridor is funded through the FTA's Build Grant, we'll likely either go for a discretionary grants or new starts or small starts programs to achieve some of these corridors. Just a reminder, if you have any comments after thoughts, feel free to comment on the survey or go to the website to provide that feedback, and we can address it separately or through incorporating it into the project, and we'll share that with you the next round of public engagement. So just going on as I wait for some more comments to roll in, if you guys have any. So this was actually the last meeting of our first round of public engagement, utilizing this digital platform. So I appreciate all your patience and participation. I thought it was really, really good. So we've done, specific public meetings for each corridor. The survey will be open probably until early August now, as we're planning a few more public engagement opportunities towards the end of the month. And then once that wraps up, we'll kind of consolidate all of our comments from the survey as well as these public engagement meetings. And then that will help us kind of direct the next portion of the project, which will be that deeper dive into the station areas. So the next phase of public engagement that will be focused on those station area frameworks is likely going to be at the end of August. So if you are subscribed to this, you'll get some emails about when those next meetings will be. And if not, you can find those meetings on our project website. So with that, if there's no other questions, I'd like to say thank you again. I thought this was a really great, engaging opportunity. You had some great feedback and some great questions. And I want to thank my project team for doing a great job of addressing those and sharing some of their insights on the project.